What if one of the most effective sounds for calming the human brain has been falling from the sky all along? Rain can slow the breath, soften anxious thoughts, improve focus, and guide millions of people into sleep. A sound so ordinary, yet so powerful. No screen, no medicine, no effort, just water meeting the world. But why? Why does the brain often relax within seconds of hearing rainfall? Why can a storm outside feel safer than silence inside? Why do countless people search for rain sounds every night, as if the mind is remembering something ancient? Hidden inside this familiar sound is a remarkable story of neuroscience, evolution, memory, and survival. The ear hears droplets, but the brain hears rhythm, safety, shelter, and continuity. In this documentary, we will explore how rain masks stress, how it changes attention, why it affects the nervous system, and why modern humans still depend on a sound older than civilization itself. If you enjoy deep scientific documentaries made for calm learning, relaxation, and sleep-friendly listening, subscribe to Physical Depth. Like this video and share it with someone who needs a quieter mind tonight. Now, close the door, lower the lights, and listen carefully. Because rain may be doing far more to your brain than you realize. Across many parts of the world, the sound of rain is often described in similar ways. People call it calming, gentle, peaceful, or comforting. Some use it to fall asleep. Others play recordings of rainfall while reading, studying, or resting. This reaction appears so common that it can seem almost universal. Yet the question remains, why would falling water create such a quiet sense of ease inside the human mind? Rain is not music. It carries no melody, no language, and no deliberate design. It arrives as countless droplets striking roofs, leaves, pavement, soil, and water surfaces. Each contact creates a small sound. Together, these tiny impacts merge into a broad and continuous acoustic field. The result is soft, textured, and slowly changing. The brain often responds well to this kind of sound because it contains complexity without demanding attention. Unlike sudden noises, rainfall usually develops gradually. A few drops become a light pattern. Light rain becomes steady motion. This slow transition matters. The human nervous system is highly sensitive to abrupt changes in the environment. Sharp sounds may signal danger, movement, or conflict. Rain, by contrast, often presents itself as a stable condition rather than an urgent event. There is also an important environmental meaning hidden inside the experience. For much of human history, rain was linked to water supply, fertile soil, cooler temperatures, and seasonal renewal. Though modern life has reduced direct dependence on weather, the human brain still carries ancient sensitivities shaped by natural surroundings. Rain may also create a feeling of shelter. To hear rainfall while remaining indoors can produce a clear contrast between outside movement and inside safety. The world beyond the walls becomes active, while the immediate space remains warm and protected. What seems like a simple, pleasant sound is therefore more than sound alone. It is a combination of acoustics, memory, biology, and environment. The quiet appeal of rain begins where the outer atmosphere meets the inner architecture of the brain. Long before humans developed speech, the brain was already listening. Hearing is among the oldest sensory systems in the animal world, evolving not for conversation, but for survival. Sound could reveal movement in darkness, approaching weather, flowing water, nearby animals, or danger hidden beyond sight. Millions of years before language emerged, the nervous system was learning to interpret patterns in the environment. Vision depends on direction. It requires light and a clear line of sight. Hearing works differently. Sound travels around obstacles, through vegetation, across open land, and into the night. For early humans, this made listening essential. A distant branch breaking, wind shifting through grass, or water moving over stone could carry information long before the source became visible. Because of this history, the auditory brain developed as a rapid detection system. It constantly monitors the surrounding world, even when attention seems focused elsewhere. During sleep, hearing remains partially active. In quiet moments, the brain continues scanning for changes in rhythm, pitch, and intensity. This constant background analysis is ancient and automatic. Language arrived much later. Spoken words transformed sound into symbols, meaning, and culture. Yet speech was layered onto neural circuits that were already specialized for recognizing natural acoustic patterns. The human brain did not begin as a language machine. It first became an environmental listening machine. This older foundation may help explain why certain sounds still affect us so deeply. Rainfall contains features the brain has processed for countless generations: continuity, distance, texture, and predictable variation. It resembles the kind of ambient information early humans would have heard while resting near shelter or waiting through changing weather. When modern people say rain feels natural, they may be describing something biologically real. The sound enters pathways shaped long before cities, engines, or electronic devices existed. It reaches systems that evolved to understand forests, rivers, wind, but we saw whether we could find any sound. The sound remains anywhere in different ways. The color of cities opens and folds. It is to activate an ancient mode of perception, one that predates speech itself. Beneath language, beneath thought, the brain is still listening the way it once had to. Rain may seem like a single sound, but acoustically, it is made from thousands of separate events occurring at once. Every droplet falls with a slightly different size, speed, angle, and destination. Some strike leaves, others land on rooftops, soil, glass, metal, pavement, or open water. Each surface responds differently, producing its own tone, softness, resonance, or brief echo. What the ear receives is not one signal, but a layered field of countless tiny impacts blending together in real time. This is part of what gives rain its distinctive texture. Unlike a machine that repeats identical cycles, rainfall contains constant variation. No 2 seconds are exactly the same. Yet despite this variation, the overall pattern remains stable. The sound changes continuously, without becoming chaotic. For the brain, this combination can feel both interesting and safe. Scientists often describe environmental sounds like rain as broadband noise. This means energy is spread across many frequencies, rather than concentrated in a narrow tone. A whistle or alarm focuses sound into sharp frequencies that easily capture attention. Rain distributes sound more widely, creating a softer and less intrusive auditory presence. The intensity of rainfall also matters. Light drizzle produces delicate high-frequency taps and faint hiss-like textures. Moderate rain adds fullness and density. Heavy rain introduces deeper impacts, flowing runoff, and resonant surfaces. Thunderstorms may add sudden low-frequency events, shifting the emotional quality entirely. But in many everyday forms, rain remains rhythmically gentle. Distance shapes the experience as well. Rain heard through a closed window becomes filtered and muted. Frequencies soften. Sharp edges disappear. What remains is a smooth, diffuse ambience. Indoors, the sound often loses detail and gains warmth, which many listeners find especially calming. The brain responds strongly to patterns that are complex but manageable. Rain offers micro-variation without demanding focused analysis. It occupies space without insisting on interpretation. What people casually call the sound of rain is therefore an acoustic mosaic. It is formed by physics, surfaces, atmosphere, architecture, and motion. Falling water becomes relaxing, not because it is simple, but because it is richly complex in a stable and gentle way. The human brain is constantly evaluating sound. Even in moments of rest, the nervous system listens for signals that may indicate danger, conflict, or sudden change. A sharp crash in the next room, footsteps approaching unexpectedly, or an alarm in the distance can immediately raise alertness. This response is fast, automatic, and deeply rooted in survival biology. Yet, rain, despite being loud at times, often produces the opposite effect. One reason is predictability. Rain usually begins gradually and follows recognizable patterns. A few drops strike the ground. The rhythm becomes steadier. Intensity may increase, but often in smooth transitions rather than abrupt bursts. The brain generally tolerates predictable sensory input far better than random sudden noise. When a sound can be anticipated, it requires less vigilance. Rain also lacks many features associated with biological threat. It does not resemble human shouting, aggressive movement, breaking objects, or the irregular sounds of struggle. Nor does it mimic the high-priority tones used by modern warning systems such as sirens, alarms, and horns. Instead, rainfall is diffuse. It comes from above and around, spread across many surfaces, rather than focused on a single alarming source. Direction matters as well. Sounds that move rapidly toward the listener can trigger attention because they suggest approach. Rain does not typically behave this way. It surrounds an area, rather than advancing through it. This creates an environmental condition, not a pursuing event. There is also familiarity. Across a lifetime, many people hear rain hundreds or thousands of times without harm. Repeated neutral experiences teach the brain that rainfall is usually safe. Through learning, the nervous system reduces unnecessary responses to common non-threatening stimuli. Of course, severe weather can change this perception. Thunder, flooding, violent wind, or storm damage may quickly transform rain into a source of concern. But ordinary rainfall, especially when heard from shelter, often remains acoustically gentle and behaviorally predictable. For that reason, the brain rarely treats light or moderate rain as an urgent problem to solve. Instead of demanding action, it often permits stillness. In the language of the nervous system, rain commonly registers not as danger, but as background weather. The human brain does not simply think, it monitors. Beneath conscious awareness, neural systems continuously evaluate whether the surrounding environment is safe enough for rest, attention, social connection, or sleep. This process happens automatically, often through subtle sensory signals. Light levels, temperature, movement, smell, and especially sound all contribute to an ongoing internal question. Is this place secure? From an evolutionary perspective, this constant assessment was essential. Early humans who detected danger quickly were more likely to survive. A hidden predator, an unstable shelter, hostile strangers, or changing weather could carry serious consequences. As a result, the nervous system developed to remain cautious by default, shifting into deeper calm only when enough evidence suggested safety. Sound plays a central role. because it reaches the brain even without direct attention. One can close the eyes, but hearing remains open. During sleep, the auditory system still responds to unusual noises. A sudden footstep or crash may wake a person immediately. This sensitivity reflects the brain's long dependence on acoustic warning signals. Yet the same system also listens for reassurance. Stable environmental sounds can indicate that no urgent change is occurring. Wind moving consistently through trees, distant water flowing, or steady rain on a roof may signal continuity rather than threat. Nothing appears to be approaching. No struggle is unfolding nearby. The environment is active, but not dangerous. When such cues are present, the brain may reduce vigilance. Muscles loosen, breathing slows, attention broadens or drifts inward. In safe settings, mental energy no longer needs to remain focused on detection. This allows reflection, conversation, creativity, or sleep. Rain often supports this transition because it masks smaller irregular sounds that might otherwise trigger monitoring. A creaking building, distant traffic, or faint movement becomes less noticeable beneath a consistent layer of ambient sound. The world feels less fragmented and more coherent. Modern life frequently keeps the brain in partial alertness through notifications, engines, voices, and unpredictable interruptions. In contrast, rainfall offers an older acoustic environment, steady, non-demanding, and familiar. The search for safety never fully stops. It is built into the nervous system. When rain helps the brain conclude that the surroundings are stable, calm becomes easier to access. What we experience as relaxation may begin as successful environmental trust. The relaxing sound of rain begins not in the mind, but in the mechanics of the ear. Before the brain can interpret calmness, pattern, or comfort, falling water must first be transformed into neural information. This conversion happens through a chain of biological structures refined over millions of years to detect movement in the air. When raindrops strike surfaces, they create vibrations that travel outward as sound waves. These waves are small changes in air pressure moving through space. As they reach the head, the outer ear helps collect and guide them inward. The curved folds of the ear slightly shape incoming frequencies, while the ear canal channels the sound toward the eardrum. The eardrum is a thin membrane that vibrates in response to pressure changes. Each subtle pulse from rainfall causes tiny movements. These vibrations are then passed into the middle ear, where three small bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes, act as a mechanical bridge. Their role is to amplify and transfer motion efficiently into the fluid-filled inner ear. Inside the cochlea, a spiral-shaped organ deep within the skull, sound becomes biology. Vibrations entering the cochlea move waves through fluid along an internal membrane lined with thousands of sensory hair cells. Different frequencies activate different regions. Higher tones may stimulate one area, lower tones another. Because rain contains many frequencies at once, numerous parts of the cochlea respond simultaneously. When these hair cells bend, they convert physical motion into electrical signals. Auditory nerve fibers then carry this coded information toward the brainstem and upward into higher auditory centers. Timing, intensity, and frequency patterns are preserved along the way. Rain is especially rich in micro-detail. Countless droplets create overlapping signals, soft fluctuations, and broad frequency textures. The ear captures this complexity moment by moment, even when the listener pays little conscious attention. What feels like a simple ambient sound is therefore the result of extraordinary precision. Membranes vibrate, bones move, fluids ripple, cells fire, and nerves transmit. By the time rain reaches awareness, it has already passed through one of the most delicate sensory systems in the human body. Calm begins as physics, then becomes perception. Once the ear has converted rain into electrical signals, the work of interpretation begins. These signals travel through the brainstem and thalamus before reaching the auditory cortex, a specialized region located in the temporal lobes. Here, raw sound is transformed into meaningful patterns. The brain does not merely hear noise. It organizes, compares, predicts, and classifies what arrives through the ears. The auditory cortex is highly sensitive to structure. It detects pitch, rhythm, timing, direction, loudness, and changes over time. It can separate voices in a crowded room, recognize a familiar footstep, or notice a distant siren beneath traffic. This ability depends on continuous pattern analysis. Sound is always changing, and the brain is always searching for order within that change. Rain presents an unusual kind of acoustic information. It is not fully random, but neither is it rigidly repetitive. Droplets fall at irregular intervals, strike different materials, and produce shifting combinations of frequencies. Yet the overall character remains stable. The auditory cortex often responds efficiently to this balance between variation and consistency. If a sound repeats too perfectly, the brain may begin to ignore it or become bored by it. If a sound is too chaotic, attention may increase in order to understand it. Rain occupies a middle zone. It changes enough to remain natural, but not enough to demand investigation. This can reduce cognitive effort. Prediction is another key function of auditory processing. The brain constantly anticipates what sound will come next. When predictions are broadly successful, neural systems tend to remain calm. Rain usually behaves within expected limits. A listener senses continuation rather than surprise. Because of this, rain can create a low-demand listening state. The auditory cortex remains active, but it is not forced into rapid threat analysis or intense concentration. Instead, sound becomes a stable background presence. This may help explain why rainfall often supports reading, reflection, or sleep. The brain receives sensory input that feels coherent without being intrusive. To the conscious mind, rain may seem simple, but inside the auditory cortex, it is recognized as a rich and manageable pattern, complex enough to feel alive, predictable enough to feel safe. Many people describe rain as white noise, but scientifically, the comparison is only partly correct. White noise is a sound signal that contains equal power across frequencies. In theory, every frequency within a range is represented evenly. This creates a steady hiss-like texture, often used in laboratories, sound masking systems, and sleep devices. To the human ear, however, true white noise can sound bright or sharp because higher frequencies are strongly present. It is uniform and effective at covering other sounds, but not always pleasant for long listening sessions. Rain is usually softer and more natural than this. A closer comparison is often pink noise. Pink noise also contains a broad range of frequencies, but energy decreases as frequency rises. Lower frequencies become relatively stronger, creating a deeper and smoother sound. Many natural systems approximate this balance, including wind, flowing water, leaves in motion, and certain patterns of rainfall. This matters because the auditory system does not respond only to volume. It responds to spectral balance, the way energy is distributed across frequencies. Sounds with excessive sharp high-frequency content may draw more attention. Sounds with a gentler balance can feel warmer, fuller, and easier to tolerate over time. Rain rarely fits perfectly into a single acoustic category. Its spectrum changes, depending on droplet size, wind, surfaces, distance, and recording method. Light drizzle on leaves may contain delicate high-frequency taps. Heavy rain on rooftops may add deeper resonance. Rainfall through a closed window may become even softer as higher frequencies are filtered away. What many listeners enjoy is not simply noise, but structured, natural noise. Rain contains broadband masking qualities, similar to white or pink noise. Yet it also includes subtle fluctuations that prevent the sound from feeling artificial. It breathes, shifts, and evolves moment to moment. This may explain why some people prefer rain recordings over synthetic sleep machines. Artificial noise can be acoustically useful, but rain often feels biologically familiar. It combines frequency balance with environmental realism. In technical terms, rain is variable atmospheric sound. In human terms, it is noise shaped into comfort. Somewhere between white noise and pink noise, nature created a texture the brain often receives with ease. The human brain is constantly searching for patterns. It compares what is happening now with what it expects to happen next. This process allows people to understand speech, navigate movement, recognize faces, and respond quickly to change. Yet prediction is not only useful for action, it also shapes emotional comfort. Environments that behave within expected limits often feel easier to inhabit. Rain is a clear example of this principle. It is never perfectly repetitive. No two droplets fall in exactly the same place or at exactly the same moment. Tiny differences in spacing, intensity, and surface impact create continuous variation. Yet despite these changes, rainfall usually preserves a recognizable overall structure. The sound remains rain. This combination can be especially calming because it gives the brain something stable to model without requiring constant correction. If a sound repeats with machine-like precision, the nervous system may begin to notice its artificiality or lose interest entirely. If a sound changes too abruptly, prediction fails and attention increases. Rain occupies a middle zone between sameness and chaos. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as an organ that minimizes uncertainty. When incoming sensory information broadly matches expectation, fewer resources may be needed for monitoring. Rain tends to satisfy this condition. The listener expects continued soft impacts, shifting density, and gradual transitions. Most of the time, that expectation is confirmed. This creates what might be called low-cost perception. The brain remains engaged enough to recognize the environment, but not so challenged that it must analyze every moment. Attention can then loosen, thoughts drift, muscles relax. Internal focus becomes easier. The effect is similar to watching waves reach a shoreline or leaves move in wind. There is change, but it unfolds within boundaries. The mind can follow without strain. Modern environments often deliver the opposite pattern: unpredictable notifications, traffic bursts, doors closing, voices interrupting, a sudden mechanical noise. These events repeatedly break expectation and pull awareness outward. Rain, by contrast, offers variability that does not feel disruptive. It changes while remaining trustworthy. What listeners experience as soothing may therefore emerge from a precise balance. The sound is alive enough to feel natural, stable enough to feel safe, and gentle enough to let the mind release effort. In that balance, predictable variation becomes mental ease. Each sound may be minor, yet the brain often notices them because they arrive suddenly and without pattern. Even low-volume disturbances can repeatedly pull attention away from rest. Rain changes this acoustic landscape through a process known as masking. In hearing science, masking occurs when one sound reduces the perception of another. A steady background signal can make irregular noises less noticeable, especially when they share overlapping frequencies or similar loudness levels. Rain is particularly effective because it spreads across many frequencies at once. Its broad, continuous texture forms an ambient layer over the environment. Instead of hearing every isolated creak or passing vehicle clearly, the listener perceives a more unified sound field. Smaller interruptions may still exist, but they lose prominence. This matters because the brain tends to prioritize contrast. A sudden sound in a quiet room stands out sharply. The same sound beneath steady rainfall may blend into the background. As contrast decreases, the nervous system often reacts less strongly. Masking can be helpful during sleep. Many people wake not because of total volume, but because of abrupt changes, an elevator starting, a voice outside, a pipe clicking in the wall. Consistent rain noise may soften these transitions, allowing the sleeping brain to remain undisturbed. The same principle can aid concentration. During reading or focused work, unpredictable noise forces attention to reorient. Rain creates a stable auditory frame that reduces the salience of competing sounds. There are limits, of course. Very loud or sharp disturbances can still break through. And if rainfall itself becomes intense enough, it may become distracting. But moderate rain often strikes an effective balance, present enough to cover disruptions, gentle enough to ignore. This helps explain why many people seek rain recordings in apartments, hotels, offices, and urban homes. They are not always searching for the sound of weather itself. Often, they are seeking protection from acoustic fragmentation. When noise masks other noise, the world feels smoother. Separate interruptions dissolve into one continuous atmosphere. In that softened environment, the brain can stop chasing every small sound and return to calm. Sound does more than inform the mind. It can directly influence the body. Certain noises trigger rapid physiological responses long before conscious thought has fully interpreted them. A sudden crash, a shout nearby, screeching brakes, or an alarm in the night may instantly tighten muscles, accelerate heartbeat, and sharpen attention. This is the stress response to sound, an ancient survival mechanism designed to prepare the body for action. The auditory system is closely linked to brain regions involved in threat detection. When unexpected or intense sound enters the ears, signals move quickly through pathways that can activate alertness networks. The amygdala, brainstem arousal systems, and autonomic nervous system may respond within fractions of a second. Hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol can then increase readiness, energy mobilization, and vigilance. This response is useful when danger is real. Rapid orientation toward a possible threat can save life and prevent injury. But in modern settings, the same mechanisms are often triggered by non-dangerous stimuli. Traffic horns, construction noise, notifications, loud neighbors, aircraft overhead, or crowded public spaces. Repeated activation can create cumulative fatigue. Not all stressful sound is loud. Unpredictability is often just as important as volume. A faint but irregular tapping in the wall may become more disturbing than a constant fan. Sudden changes demand reassessment. The brain asks again and again, what was that? Does it matter? Frequency content also plays a role. Sharp, high-frequency sounds, abrupt transients, and rapidly rising signals tend to capture attention more strongly than smooth, continuous tones. This is why alarms are intentionally designed to be difficult to ignore. Over time, persistent acoustic stress can affect mood, concentration, sleep quality, and cardiovascular health. Even when people believe they have adapted, the nervous system may still be working hard and focused on path or sleep. Understanding this helps explain why some sounds feel deeply relieving. Calm environments are not merely pleasant, they reduce the need for constant monitoring. When the brain no longer expects interruption, the body often follows. The stress response to sound is therefore not a flaw. It is a protective system shaped by evolution. Yet, in a noisy world, it can remain active too often. Relief begins when sound stops signaling problems and starts signaling stability. The human nervous system is highly skilled at classifying sounds. Without conscious effort, the brain sorts incoming audio into rough categories: important or irrelevant, safe or uncertain, distant or immediate. This rapid evaluation helps determine whether attention should increase, whether the body should prepare to act, or whether calm can continue uninterrupted. In many everyday situations, rain is placed into the category of low threat. One reason is that ordinary rainfall is usually non-directional. A barking dog, a closing door, or footsteps in a hallway often come from a specific source that may be approaching or changing position. Rain tends to surround an area rather than move toward the listener. It is perceived as atmospheric rather than personal. The sound belongs to the environment, not to an agent with intention. Rain is also behaviorally predictable. Once it begins, the brain can often estimate what will happen next. Continued droplets, slight changes in intensity, perhaps a gradual slowing or strengthening. This reduces uncertainty. The nervous system generally relaxes when sensory input behaves within familiar patterns. Another factor is the absence of social meaning. Human voices carry enormous importance because they may signal conflict, emotion, need, or threat. Mechanical sounds can indicate malfunction or intrusion. Rain communicates none of these things. It contains no demand, no request, and no hidden agenda. It simply falls. For many listeners, rainfall is associated with shelter. Hearing water strike a roof or window while remaining dry indoors creates a powerful contrast. The outside world is active, but the immediate space remains secure. This reinforces the perception that one is protected while the weather passes. Of course, context matters. Heavy storms, flooding, thunder, or damaged shelter can transform rain into a source of danger. The brain adjusts quickly when conditions change. But under ordinary circumstances, gentle or moderate rainfall often remains acoustically benign. This low-threat classification has physiological consequences. If the brain detects no urgent problem, vigilance may decrease, breathing can slow, muscles may soften, attention can drift inward rather than outward. Rain does not force itself into awareness the way alarms or sudden impacts do. Instead, it often signals that nothing immediate is required. In a world filled with demanding sounds, that message can feel profoundly calming. The human body is regulated by an automatic network known as the autonomic nervous system. Much of its work happens outside conscious control. It adjusts heart rate, breathing, digestion, pupil size, and levels of physical readiness. Within this system are two broad modes, often described in contrast: mobilization and restoration. One prepares the body for action, the other supports recovery, maintenance, and rest. The mobilizing branch, commonly associated with stress responses, becomes active during challenge or uncertainty. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, and attention narrows toward potential problems. This state is useful when quick reactions are needed, yet remaining there for long periods can be exhausting. The restorative branch, often called the parasympathetic system, supports slower states. Heart rate may decrease, breathing becomes steadier, digestion resumes more fully, Muscles release unnecessary tension. The body shifts resources away from immediate defense and toward repair. Sound can influence which direction the system moves. Harsh sweat soared, sudden, wild, well-fed, word. By contrast, stable and non-threatening auditory environments can help the body reduce readiness. Rain often belongs to this second category. Because rainfall is continuous, soft-edged, and broadly predictable, it may lower the need for constant monitoring. The brain receives sensory input that suggests environmental stability. When vigilance decreases, parasympathetic processes may become easier to access. Many people notice this subjectively. Shoulders drop, jaw tension softens, breathing lengthens without effort. The urge to scan messages, check surroundings, or remain mentally braced begins to fade. These are small shifts, but they reflect meaningful changes in nervous system tone. The effect is rarely dramatic. Rain does not function like a switch that instantly turns stress off. Instead, it often creates conditions favorable to downregulation. If a person is already overwhelmed, anxious, or unsafe, sound alone may have limited impact. But when basic conditions are secure, rainfall can gently support transition toward calmer physiology. This may explain why rain is commonly paired with rest rituals: reading near a window, lying down at night, sitting quietly indoors, or slowing after a demanding day. The sound accompanies a body moving from readiness toward recovery. Parasympathetic shifts are the biology of unwinding. Rain, for many listeners, becomes one of the signals that such unwinding is permitted. In its steady rhythm, the body is reminded that it can slow again. Breathing is both automatic and responsive. The body manages respiration without conscious effort, yet breathing patterns also change constantly in response to emotion, movement, posture, and environment. Fear can make breaths shallow and rapid. Deep rest often brings slower, fuller cycles. Because respiration sits between conscious control and unconscious regulation, it is especially sensitive to external rhythm. Sound can influence this process more than many people realize. Humans often synchronize internal timing with repeated sensory cues. Feet match the pace of music. Hands follow a metronome. Groups naturally align movement during shared tasks. This tendency toward entrainment, the alignment of biological rhythms with outside patterns, can also extend to breathing. Rain provides a gentle form of rhythmic input. It rarely follows a strict beat, yet it often maintains a broad temporal consistency. Droplets continue, density shifts slowly, and the overall sound remains steady enough to establish pace. Unlike a drum or ticking clock, rainfall does not command synchronization. It invites it subtly. When a listener rests in a quiet room during rain, breathing may gradually lengthen without deliberate intention. Exhalations sometimes become slower. Pauses between breaths may feel more comfortable. The chest no longer anticipates interruption. This is not because the body is copying each raindrop, but because the nervous system is responding to a stable external atmosphere. Slow breathing has physiological effects. It can support calmer heart rhythms, reduce muscular tension, and reinforce parasympathetic states associated with recovery. Once breathing slows, it may further signal to the brain that conditions are safe, creating a feedback loop between body and perception. Rain may be especially effective because its rhythm is organic rather than mechanical. A ticking clock can become intrusive. Perfect loops may feel artificial. Rain shifts enough to remain natural while preserving continuity. Many traditional relaxation practices use breath as the central tool. Inhale slowly, exhale fully, repeat. Rain sometimes provides a parallel structure from outside the body. It creates an ambient tempo in which slower breathing becomes easier to find. In this sense, weather can shape physiology without touching the skin. A storm passing over rooftops may quietly influence lungs, heartbeat, and posture inside the home. To breathe in time with rain is not to count drops. It is to let the body rediscover a slower rhythm through the steady movement of the world outside. Sleep does not usually arrive all at once. For most people, it begins as a gradual transition. Attention loosens, thoughts become less organized, muscles release tension, and awareness of the surrounding environment starts to fade. The brain shifts through changing states, moving from active wakefulness toward lighter stages of rest. This passage can be delicate, and sound often plays an important role in whether it is interrupted or supported. One obstacle to sleep is vigilance. Even while lying still in darkness, the brain may continue scanning for signs that require response. A hallway noise, distant traffic, voices outside, or a sudden change in silence can reactivate alertness. The body remains physically in bed, yet mentally prepared to wake fully if needed. Rain can help reduce this problem in several ways. First, it creates continuity. Instead of a silent room punctuated by unpredictable disturbances, the sleeper hears a stable acoustic background. Small noises become less distinct beneath the broader texture of rainfall. Second, rain offers low informational content. It contains no words to interpret, no melody to follow, and no narrative to track. The mind is less likely to engage analytically. This allows thoughts to drift rather than attach themselves to new stimuli. Third, rainfall often reinforces sensations associated with nighttime shelter. The contrast between weather outside and safety indoors may signal that no action is required. The world is active beyond the walls, but the body can remain still. Many people use recorded rain for insomnia or naps because it recreates these conditions even when skies are clear. While it does not treat all causes of sleep difficulty, it can support the environment in which sleep becomes more likely. There is also a psychological effect in repetition. As the sound continues unchanged, the brain receives ongoing evidence that nothing urgent is happening. Each passing minute without disruption may lower resistance to rest. The phrase, "drifting to sleep," is revealing. Sleep often feels less like a decision and more like a release of control. Rain can accompany that release by softening the edges of awareness. When listeners say rain helps them sleep, they may be describing a convergence of acoustics, physiology, and perception. The sound does not force unconsciousness. It simply removes some of the obstacles that keep wakefulness in place, allowing the mind to drift where it was already trying to go. For many people, the sound of rain is linked not only to acoustics, but to memory. Long before anyone understands neuroscience or environmental psychology, the brain is already forming associations between sensory experience and emotional state. Childhood is especially important in this process. Repeated moments of comfort, safety, and routine can become permanently connected to specific sounds. Rain often enters memory from the edge of the room. A child may hear droplets tapping on a window, water moving through gutters, or soft impacts across a roof while remaining indoors. The outside world becomes active and distant, while the inside space remains warm, dry, and familiar. This contrast can be powerful. It teaches the nervous system that certain sounds accompany protection rather than threat. The developing brain is highly associative. It links sensations occurring together in time: voices of caregivers, blankets, evening light, indoor warmth, and rainfall beyond the walls. Later in life, Hearing similar sounds may reactivate parts of that emotional network, sometimes without clear conscious recollection. This helps explain why rain can feel comforting, even when no specific memory comes to mind. The response may not appear as a vivid scene from childhood. Instead, it emerges as a bodily impression: ease, softness, nostalgia, or quietness difficult to name. Windows often become symbolic in these memories. They allow observation without exposure. A child can watch weather safely from behind glass, learning that nature can be dramatic while the immediate environment remains secure. This experience may strengthen the sense that rain belongs outside, while safety belongs inside. Of course, childhood experiences vary widely. Not everyone associates rain with comfort. For some, it may be linked to fear, isolation, flooding, or instability. But where conditions were secure, rainfall often became part of a calm domestic atmosphere. As adults, people sometimes recreate these early sensory settings intentionally, sitting by a window during storms, reading while rain falls, resting under blankets with recorded rainfall in the background. These behaviors may be less about weather itself than about returning to an internal template of safety. The sound of rain can therefore carry more than present-day acoustics. It may contain echoes of rooms once occupied, evenings once repeated, and a nervous system learning for the first time that one can be sheltered while the world changes outside. There is a particular kind of calm that appears when weather is active outside, while the interior remains secure. Rain strikes rooftops, windows, streets, and trees. Wind moves through dark branches. Water gathers in gutters and runs along pavement. Yet inside the room, light stays steady, temperature remains controlled, and the body is protected. This contrast between outer movement and inner stability can be deeply reassuring. Human psychology is highly responsive to boundaries. Walls, doors, roofs, and windows do more than separate spaces physically. They help the brain distinguish between exposure and refuge. Throughout history, shelter has been one of the most important conditions for survival. Protection from cold, heat, predators, and storms allowed rest, recovery, and social life to continue. When rain falls outside a secure structure, that ancient function of shelter becomes audible. The sound of droplets on surfaces confirms that conditions beyond the boundary are changing, while the body remains unaffected. Safety is not only known intellectually, it is sensed directly. This may explain why rain often feels more comforting indoors than outdoors. In open space, wet clothing, reduced visibility, cold temperatures, and unstable footing may demand adaptation. Indoors, those same atmospheric forces become observation rather than burden. The listener experiences weather without having to solve it. Windows intensify this effect. They allow visual contact with movement outside while preserving separation. One can watch streets darken, leaves bend, or water stream down glass while remaining dry and still. The environment becomes dynamic scenery, framed by security. The nervous system often responds positively to this arrangement. External uncertainty remains present, but contained. Internal resources can stay allocated to calm rather than defense. Reading, conversation, reflection, or sleep may become easier. Many cultural rituals reflect this instinct. Warm drinks during storms, lamps lit on rainy evenings, blankets near windows, quiet indoor gatherings during bad weather. These habits combine comfort with protected observation. Rain therefore does more than sound pleasant. It highlights the presence of shelter itself. The roof overhead, the walls around the room, and the dry floor beneath the feet become meaningful through contrast with what is happening outside. When weather moves beyond the walls, and the interior holds steady, the brain receives a simple message. The world is changing, but you are secure within it. Some sounds do more than reach the ears. They reach the past. A certain melody, the creak of an old floorboard, distant train tracks at night, or rain against a window, can evoke feelings that seem older than the present moment. Often, the memory arrives before language does. One may feel softened, reflective, or quietly moved without immediately knowing why. This is the influence of nostalgia within the auditory brain. Hearing is strongly connected to memory systems. Sound travels through auditory pathways, but emotional meaning often depends on interactions with deeper regions involved in association and recollection, including the hippocampus and amygdala. These networks help link sensory input with places, routines, and emotional states from earlier life. Unlike photographs, sounds are rarely stored as clear snapshots. They're often encoded as atmospheres. The hum of an old home, dishes in another room, footsteps in a hallway, evening television through walls, or rainfall during bedtime may become part of a larger emotional context. Later, hearing similar sounds can reactivate that context as a whole. Rain is especially suited to this process because it often accompanies recurring life moments. Childhood evenings indoors, school mornings under grey skies, long drives through wet roads, quiet weekends, time spent reading near a window. Because rain frequently appears during transitional or intimate periods of life, it becomes woven into memory. Nostalgia is not always happiness. It can include longing, tenderness, loss, or awareness of time passing. Yet even bittersweet nostalgia often carries calming effects. It slows attention and turns the mind inward. Familiar sounds can create continuity between past and present, reminding the listener that earlier versions of life still exist in memory. This may explain why recorded rain can feel emotionally richer than synthetic noise. White noise may mask distraction, but rain often carries symbolic and autobiographical depth. It sounds like weather, but also like places once inhabited and seasons once lived through. The brain does not separate sensation from meaning as cleanly as it may seem. A raindrop on glass can be both present sound and stored experience. When people say rain feels comforting, they may be hearing more than water. They may be hearing traces of bedrooms, windows, conversations, quiet evenings, and forgotten routines. In the auditory brain, nostalgia is not merely remembered. Sometimes it is heard. Rain is a physical event, but human experience rarely treats it as only physics. Across cultures, rainfall has gathered meanings, shaped by agriculture, religion, literature, music, and daily life. Water falls from the atmosphere according to temperature, pressure, and moisture. Yet in the human imagination, rain may represent renewal, sadness, patience, fertility, memory, cleansing, or change. These meanings often begin with survival. In farming societies, seasonal rain could determine harvest success, livestock health, and access to drinking water. Too little rain brought drought. Timely rain brought growth. As generations repeated these experiences, weather patterns became woven into rituals, calendars, and collective emotion. Rain was not background scenery. It was part of whether communities flourished. Storytelling then expanded these associations. In poetry and folklore, rain often marks transition. It arrives before new beginnings, during periods of reflection, or at moments when old conditions are being washed away. In some traditions, rain is linked to blessing and abundance. In others, it symbolizes melancholy or longing. Both interpretations can coexist, because rain changes the atmosphere visibly and audibly. Modern film and literature continue this pattern. Directors use rainfall to slow scenes, intensify introspection, or create emotional distance from ordinary time. Writers describe rainy streets, dim windows, and gray skies to signal mood before any character speaks. Audiences learn these cues repeatedly, reinforcing shared expectations. Seasonal climate also matters. In regions with long, dry periods, rain may be greeted with relief and celebration. In colder or flood-prone areas, it may carry inconvenience or concern. Emotional meaning depends partly on ecological context. These cultural layers can influence how the brain responds to sound itself. A person who has learned to associate rain with comfort, romance, harvest, or quiet evenings may hear rainfall differently from someone who links it to disruption or danger. Perception is never purely sensory. It is shaped by memory and social meaning. Even the language used for rain reflects this richness. Drizzle, mist, shower, monsoon, downpour, spring rain, autumn rain. Each term carries atmosphere beyond meteorology. When listeners find rain relaxing, they may be responding not only to acoustics and biology, but to centuries of inherited symbolism. The sound of rainfall enters the ear as vibration, yet it often arrives in the mind, already carrying stories. Although many people describe rain as soothing, the response is far from universal. Human reactions to sound are shaped by biology, memory, culture, temperament, and circumstance. A stimulus that calms one person may irritate or distress another. Rain is no exception. Its reputation for relaxation reflects common patterns, not a rule of nature. One reason some people dislike rain is association with discomfort. Wet clothing, cold temperatures, delayed travel, traffic congestion, poor visibility, and cancelled plans can turn rainfall into inconvenience. If repeated experiences link rain with stress or frustration, the sound itself may begin to carry negative emotional weight. For others, rain is tied to more serious memories. Flooding, storm damage, power loss, unsafe housing, or frightening weather events can leave lasting impressions. In such cases, rainfall may activate vigilance rather than calm. The nervous system learns from experience, and sounds connected to threat can remain sensitive long after danger has passed. Sensory preference also varies. Some individuals are more reactive to continuous noise, repetitive tapping, or specific frequency ranges. Rain on metal roofs, gutters, or windows can become distracting or irritating instead of soothing. What one listener perceives as soft texture, another may hear as endless interruption. Mood can influence perception as well. Gray skies and rainy conditions may reduce energy for some people, especially in climates with long, dark seasons. In these contexts, rain may symbolize isolation or reduced activity rather than rest. Personality differences matter too. Individuals who prefer bright stimulation, outdoor movement, or strong sunlight may simply find rainy environments less pleasant. Calmness is not always the desired state. Cultural and geographic background can also shape response. In regions where rain frequently causes flooding, crop loss, or infrastructure problems, it may be approached with caution. In dry regions, the same rainfall may be welcomed. This diversity of reaction reveals an important principle. Sound has no fixed emotional meaning. The brain interprets audio through personal history and present context. Rain is only vibration in air until memory and expectation give it significance. Understanding why some people dislike rain does not weaken the science of why others enjoy it. Instead, it completes the picture. Relaxation is not contained in the sound alone. It emerges from the relationship between the sound and the listener. Many people assume concentration requires silence. In some situations, that is true. Complex reasoning, precise memory tasks, or work in noisy environments often benefit from reduced distraction. Yet, complete silence is not always the ideal condition for focus. For many minds, a gentle and steady background sound can improve the ability to remain engaged with a task. Rain is one of the most common examples. The reason lies partly in how attention operates. Focus is not simply maximum intensity directed at one object. It is also the management of competing stimuli. In quiet settings, small interruptions may become highly noticeable. Footsteps in another room, traffic outside, a refrigerator turning on, distant voices, or one's own shifting thoughts. These minor events can repeatedly pull awareness away from the intended task. Rain helps by creating a continuous auditory field. Instead of abrupt contrasts between silence and interruption, the listener hears a stable layer of soft sound. Competing noises may become less prominent, allowing attention to remain anchored more easily. There is also a cognitive effect in moderate sensory occupation. When the environment is too empty, the mind may wander in search of stimulation. Internal chatter increases. Unrelated thoughts expand. A gentle soundscape can occupy a small portion of awareness, reducing the tendency for attention to drift excessively. Rain is especially useful because it carries low semantic content. It contains no language to process, no lyrics to follow, and no narrative demand. The brain can register its presence without devoting much conscious effort. This distinguishes it from television, conversations, or music with strong emotional shifts. Some researchers describe optimal focus as a balance between understimulation and overload. Rain often sits near this middle range, enough sensory texture to steady awareness, not enough complexity to compete with the task. This is why many people choose rainfall while reading, writing, coding, studying, or doing repetitive work. They are not necessarily seeking relaxation alone. They are shaping an environment where attention becomes smoother and less fragile. Of course, preferences differ. Some require silence, while others find any sound distracting. But for many listeners, gentle rain provides an acoustic scaffold for concentration. Mental focus does not always emerge from emptiness. Sometimes it grows best within a calm atmosphere, one where the mind has something soft to rest against while it works. The brain is rarely completely idle. Even during rest, it continues monitoring the environment for movement, change, and relevance. Sounds are especially effective at capturing this low-level attention because hearing remains active in the background. Yet not all sounds demand the same kind of response. Some seize awareness and require interpretation. Others are noticed without pulling the mind into active involvement. Rain often belongs to this second category. This distinction can be described as attention without engagement. A listener remains aware that sound is present, but does not need to analyze it, answer it, or track its meaning. The auditory system registers the environment, while higher cognitive systems remain relatively free. Human voices illustrate the opposite case. Speech carries language, emotion, and social importance. Even overheard conversations can become difficult to ignore because the brain automatically searches for meaning. Music with lyrics, sudden alarms, or television dialogue often produce similar effects. They do not merely occupy space, they compete for mental resources. Rain typically avoids this competition. It contains pattern, but no message. It changes, but not in ways that imply demand. One can hear it clearly while continuing to read, think, rest, or drift into thought. The sound remains present at the edge of consciousness rather than moving to the center. This may explain why rainfall is often described as background in a positive sense. Many background sounds are irritating because they interrupt repeatedly. Rain, by contrast, can provide presence without intrusion. There is also value in this state for emotional regulation. Minds under stress often swing between hypervigilance and exhaustion. A sound that holds gentle awareness without requiring effort can create a middle ground. The person feels connected to the environment, yet not burdened by it. In meditation practices, similar principles are sometimes used. Attention may rest lightly on breath, wind, or ambient sound, not to solve anything, but to stabilize awareness. Rain naturally offers such an anchor. Modern life often surrounds people with signals engineered to demand engagement. Notifications, advertisements, voices, alerts, headlines. Rain offers the opposite experience. It is sensory input that asks for nothing. To hear rain while remaining mentally free is a subtle pleasure. The brain continues attending to the world, but no longer has to chase every stimulus within it. In that space, attention can soften without disappearing. Meditation is often misunderstood as the complete absence of thought. In practice, it is usually the cultivation of a different relationship with attention. Rather than chasing every thought or reacting to every sensation, the mind learns to rest more steadily in the present moment. Breath, posture, bodily sensation, or ambient sound may serve as anchors during this process. Rain naturally provides many of the qualities such anchors require. One challenge in meditation is the restless tendency of attention. Thoughts move toward plans, memories, worries, or distractions. External noises can intensify this movement, especially when they are abrupt or meaningful. A nearby conversation, a notification tone, or traffic horn can pull awareness outward immediately. Rain often has the opposite effect. Its sound is continuous, soft, and non-verbal. Because it contains no language and little urgency, it does not strongly compete for interpretation. The mind can notice rainfall without needing to solve anything about it. This makes rain useful as a passive focal point. It seems that the shares of the eye are endless. A meditator may rest awareness on the changing texture of droplets, the steady hiss of distant rainfall, or the rhythm of water against surfaces. If thoughts wander, attention can return gently to the sound, much as it returns to breathing in many contemplative traditions. Rain also supports environmental containment. When heard indoors, it often reinforces the feeling of shelter and stillness. The outside world remains active, yet separated by walls and windows. This contrast can make inward attention easier to sustain. Physiologically, meditation states are often associated with slower breathing, reduced muscular tension, and decreased reactivity. As explored earlier, rainfall may encourage similar shifts by lowering vigilance and promoting steadier respiration. The sound and the state can therefore reinforce one another. Many guided meditation recordings include rain for precisely these reasons. It offers sensory presence without cognitive demand. Unlike music, it rarely pushes emotion in a specific direction. Unlike silence, it can soften disruptive background noise. Of course, meditation does not require rain. One can meditate in cities, deserts, forests, or quiet rooms. Yet rainfall often creates conditions that make the practice more accessible. When listeners say rain helps them clear the mind, they may be noticing this alignment. The sound does not create enlightenment or erase thought. It simply provides a gentle atmosphere in which attention can settle, return, and rest more easily. For most of human history, the sound of rain could only be heard when weather arrived. Today, rainfall can be summoned instantly through phones, speakers, streaming platforms, and dedicated sleep devices. A person may sit in a dry apartment under clear skies while listening to a thunderstorm in another hemisphere, or an artificial loop generated entirely by software. Rain has become portable, programmable, and always available. This shift reflects a broader pattern in modern life: the translation of natural environments into digital tools for regulation and comfort. Many people use rain apps to sleep, study, meditate, or reduce stress. Instead of waiting for seasonal weather, they create a chosen atmosphere on demand. These systems vary widely. Some use high-quality field recordings captured in forests, cities, rooftops, tents, or distant valleys. Others generate synthetic rainfall through layered noise, randomized droplets, and filtered textures designed to mimic natural acoustics. Many apps allow customization: light drizzle, heavy storm, window rain, rain on leaves, thunder at low volume, or mixed sounds such as rain with wind and fireplace ambience. The appeal lies partly in control. Real weather cannot be adjusted. It may be too loud, too brief, too intense, or absent entirely. Digital rain can be timed for 20 minutes or 8 hours, matched to personal volume preferences, and repeated consistently each night. For people in noisy urban settings, this technology can be especially useful. Rain recordings may mask traffic, neighbors, or household sounds, while creating a more stable, auditory environment. Travelers often use them in unfamiliar hotels, where small noises feel unusually noticeable. Yet digital rain also reveals something about contemporary nervous systems. Many modern spaces lack the acoustic qualities in which humans evolved: wind through trees, water movement, distant natural ambience, gradual transitions of sound. Instead, environments are often dominated in such distinctions from the engines, electronics, and abrupt interruptions. Simulated rain becomes a substitute for missing sensory ecology. There are limits. Low-quality loops may feel artificial. Repetition can become noticeable. Speakers cannot fully reproduce the spatial depth of actual weather. Still, for millions of listeners, digital rain works well enough. What once fell only from clouds can now emerge from code. Through simulations and apps, people are not merely consuming sound. They are rebuilding fragments of nature inside technological life, one quiet storm at a time. If natural rainfall helps many people relax, an obvious question follows: can artificial rain produce the same effect? For millions of listeners using apps, speakers, and sleep machines, the practical answer is often yes. But scientifically, the comparison is more nuanced. Artificial rain can reproduce many of the useful acoustic properties of real weather, while lacking some of its environmental depth. At the most basic level, the brain responds to sound patterns, not only to their source. If a recording provides steady broadband texture, gentle variation, and masking of disruptive noise, it may support calmness in ways similar to actual rainfall. For sleep or concentration, these functional qualities are often what matter most. This is why many people benefit from rain loops played through headphones or bedside speakers. The nervous system may still interpret the sound as low-threat, continuous, and non-demanding. Heart rate can slow, attention may soften, and smaller household noises become less noticeable. However, real rain often includes dimensions that recordings only partially capture. Natural weather is spatially complex. Sound reflects from roofs, streets, trees, and distant surfaces. Intensity shifts with wind direction. Pressure changes may be felt in the air. Light levels dim. Temperature drops. Smell changes as soil releases petrichor. The body receives a multi-sensory event, not just audio. Artificial rain usually isolates one channel of that experience. It delivers sound without humidity, scent, atmospheric pressure, or visual cues. For some listeners, this is sufficient. For others, the absence of surrounding context makes recordings feel flatter or less convincing. Quality also matters. Core loops may repeat too obviously, causing the brain to notice artificial structure. Synthetic sounds with harsh frequencies or mechanical regularity can become distracting. High-quality recordings with subtle randomness tend to feel more natural and effective. Expectation influences outcome as well. If a person believes a rain app helps them sleep, that positive association can strengthen the effect over time. The brain learns rituals quickly. In this sense, artificial rain does not need to be identical to real rain in order to be useful. It only needs to recreate enough of the relevant cues: continuity, softness, variation, and safety. So, can artificial rain work the same way? Sometimes almost, sometimes partly, and sometimes remarkably well. Nature provides the original signal. Technology offers an approximation that, for many modern minds, is close enough to calm the night. To understand why rain may feel comforting, it helps to look beyond the modern home and back across human history. For most of our species' existence, water was not a convenience delivered through pipes or stored in vast infrastructure. It was a daily necessity, tied directly to landscape, season, and weather. Rain often meant life continuing. Every human body depends on water. Cells require it, blood carries it, temperature regulation depends on it, and agriculture cannot function long without it. Long before written language, communities learned to watch skies, clouds, rivers, and seasonal cycles because access to water shaped survival. In many regions, rainfall determined whether seeds germinated, grasslands remained usable, and animals could be hunted or herded successfully. A timely rainy season could support food abundance. Failed rains could bring migration, scarcity, or conflict. The sound of water arriving from the sky was therefore not trivial background noise. It was linked to ecological stability. Civilizations grew around this reality. Ancient settlements clustered near rivers, lakes, springs, and fertile floodplains sustained by seasonal rain. Calendars were built around wet and dry cycles. Religious ceremonies often invoked rain, thanked for rain, or feared its absence. Water entered mythology because it already governed material life. Even in non-agricultural settings, rainfall could cool overheated land, refill natural basins, reduce dust, and restore vegetation. After dry periods, rain frequently transformed entire environments. Plants revived, animal behavior shifted, and movement patterns changed. Modern urban life can obscure this dependence. Water now appears by turning a handle or pressing a button. Food arrives through supply chains, disconnected from visible weather. Yet biology has changed far less than technology. Human nervous systems remain descendants of organisms shaped by fluctuating water availability. This does not mean the brain consciously hears rain and calculates agricultural benefit. Rather, over deep time, environments associated with water often correlated with survival and renewal. Natural selection may have favored sensitivity to such cues, while culture reinforced their importance generation after generation. When rain sounds pleasant today, part of that response may arise from this long inheritance. The listener in a city apartment and the farmer awaiting seasonal clouds live different lives, yet both remain water-dependent organisms. Rain is not merely sound, it is a signal that has accompanied human continuity for thousands of years. In hearing it, a modern mind may still recognize an ancient form of reassurance. Much of life unfolds through rhythm. Day becomes night, Tides rise and fall. Seasons rotate through warmth and cold. Lungs expand and release. Hearts contract and recover. Even at microscopic scales, cells follow cycles of repair, signaling, and metabolism. The natural world is not static. It moves in repeating patterns across many layers of time. The human brain developed within these rhythms. For countless generations, waking was shaped by sunlight, activity by weather, migration by seasons, and rest by darkness. Before artificial lighting and constant digital stimulation, external cycles played a larger role in regulating internal states. Biological clocks evolved to anticipate recurring change. Because of this history, rhythmic environments often feel easier for the nervous system to process. Predictable cycles reduce uncertainty. They allow the body to prepare rather than react suddenly. Sunrise arrives gradually. Waves return in sequence. Wind rises and falls with broad continuity. These patterns are dynamic, yet rarely abrupt. Rain belongs to this wider family of natural rhythms. It is not perfectly periodic, but it often arrives in sustained phases. Light tapping becomes steady fall, then softens again. Showers pass, return, and move on. Within each event are countless microrhythms formed by droplets striking surfaces at changing intervals. Lees of sow, the comfort many people feel, may come partly from resonance between outer rhythm and inner regulation. Breathing can slow alongside steady sound. Attention can settle into repeating texture. The mind recognizes motion that changes without becoming chaotic. Modern environments often disrupt this relationship. Notifications arrive at random. Artificial light extends day into night. Traffic surges unpredictably. Work schedules ignore seasonal cues. Many people live within systems optimized for efficiency rather than biological cadence. In such settings, natural rhythms can feel restorative because they reintroduce patterns the nervous system handles well. A rainstorm outside the window, ocean waves in the distance, or leaves moving in wind may remind the body of older temporal structures. The word universal should be used carefully. Not everyone responds identically to the same sounds or cycles. Personal history and context always matter. Yet across cultures, many people repeatedly seek environments shaped by water, wind, firelight, and seasonal movement. This suggests something important. Comfort may not come only from pleasure, but from compatibility. Certain rhythms fit the architecture of human physiology more smoothly than others. When rain calms the mind, it may be because the sound carries a pattern older than modern life, one the body still knows how to follow. The modern world is technologically advanced, densely connected, and acoustically crowded. Many people move through days shaped by engines, notifications, traffic, schedules, and constant streams of information. Attention is repeatedly divided. The nervous system is asked to monitor screens, conversations, deadlines, and unpredictable interruptions. In such conditions, calm often becomes something to actively search for. Rain remains one of the simplest ways many people find it. Across this documentary, several layers of explanation have emerged. Acoustically, rain provides broad, gentle sound that can mask sharper disturbances. Neurologically, it offers predictable variation, complex enough to feel natural, stable enough to avoid demanding constant analysis. Physiologically, it may support slower breathing, reduced vigilance, and shifts toward restorative states. Psychologically, it can evoke shelter, childhood memory, and emotional continuity. Historically, it is tied to water, survival, and seasonal renewal. No single factor explains everything. Human experience rarely works through one cause alone. Instead, rain appears calming because multiple systems often align at once. The ear receives soft, textured sound. The auditory cortex detects manageable pattern. The stress response finds little urgency. Breathing slows. Attention softens. Memory adds familiarity. Culture adds meaning. The body senses no immediate demand. In contrast to many modern signals, rain asks nothing from the listener. It carries no message to answer, no task to complete, no decision to make. It is present without requiring engagement. This may be one reason it feels increasingly valuable in an age built on interruption. Rain also reminds the mind that not all movement requires action. Outside, clouds shift, water falls, streets darken, leaves bend, gutters fill, and then the system passes on. Change occurs continuously without personal involvement. One can witness transformation while remaining still. Of course, not everyone experiences rain this way. Personal history, climate, trauma, and preference all shape response. Yet the widespread appeal of rainfall suggests a recurring compatibility between natural sound and human regulation. A modern mind is new in circumstance, but ancient in structure. It still carries sensory systems shaped long before cities and devices existed. Rain meets those systems in a language older than words: rhythm, texture, continuity, and safety. That may be why, after all technological change, many people still return to the same quiet sound at night. Water falls through air. The room grows still, and the brain remembers how to rest. Rain is more than weather. It is a natural signal the human brain has understood for thousands of years. In its rhythm, we hear safety. In its softness, we find relief. In its steady movement, the mind is reminded that not all change requires action. Perhaps that is why, even in the modern world, we still return to rain when we need rest. If you enjoyed this journey into science and calm reflection, please subscribe to apostal.co, like the video, and share it with others who may need a quieter night. Until next time, thank you for listening.